Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 Patch 8 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're looking at how Patch 8 has breathed entirely new life into one of the least used subclasses in the entire game, turning it from a bit of a joke to a devastatingly powerful melee combatant with incredibly disruptive control abilities, excellent ranged attacks when the situation calls for it, and one of the most powerful defensive abilities available in Honor mode. I'm talking, of course, about the Wild Magic Barbarian, whose random effects when you rage are actually quite powerful and very disruptive to enemy plans, but suffer from unreliability and multi-attribute dependency. Patch 8 solves all of those problems by making the character vastly more reliable and completely fixing the multi-attribute dependency through the existence of Hexblade Warlock, turning this character into an extremely reliable and powerful combatant, but keeping all of the awesome fun that you get with the random effects, making it just an incredibly satisfying playthrough because you have to plan around cool random things happening, and you never know how you're going to bring ruin to your enemies next. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Huntsville Actual for the $5 donation, and to Shrill, Hudson Miles, and HC Sympataja for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support. It really means so much to me. Alright, let's get wild. I'm using Karlach as the example character here, because this is a barbarian build, and of course she's the barbarian of the party, but also I think it's incredibly lore-friendly given what we know of Karlach's background. Her whole thing is the unstable infernal magic embedded inside of her. So I've long said that Wild Magic Barbarian I think actually makes more sense for her from a lore perspective than Wild Heart Barbarian. She has this unstable magic, and she's a born and raised city girl turned mob enforcer. Where is she going to get an affinity for bears? So it makes way more sense that the overflowing magic would express itself as wild magic rages. I also think for the same reason that Hexblade Warlock makes a lot of sense. Interpreting the infernal core embedded inside of her as an unwilling warlock patronage, I think is an extremely lore-friendly and interesting take on the character from a mechanical perspective. So I actually think this build fits Karlach very well. If you're building this as a custom character, I actually think that the strongest race for this build is one that I don't recommend on this channel that often, Asmodeus Tiefling. Asmodeus Tiefling gets extra casts of Darkness every day, which this character can use to incredible effect, and also gets Hellish Rebuke, which uses your Charisma as its casting stat. Since this character is going to have very high Charisma, we can use Asmodeus Tiefling's spells extremely effectively. Of course, you can also build with the normally incredibly powerful races like Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for the bonus movement speed, or Halfling for the ability to reroll ones, but Asmodeus Tiefling is both flavorful and very powerful for this build, so that's what I would recommend. At first level, we're going to be taking a level of Warlock, and, as you are likely to hear me say pretty frequently, we are going to be taking a level of Hexblade Warlock. Don't worry though, this time we're using our powers for good, rather than using Hexblade Warlock just to break Swordsbard or Paladin more than they were already. We're using it to enable a really cool thing, so I think that this is actually one of the most fun uses for Hexblade Warlock, and the power level that this character brings. For our cantrip selection with our Hexblade, we are going to be taking Eldritch Blast, which gives us a great ranged option. Now, obviously, we can't use this when we're raging, but in the early game, we won't have enough rage charges to rage in every combat, most likely, so having a spell-based ranged option is going to be extremely helpful. In the later game, we will often be better off just camping in darkness and firing Eldritch Blasts. There's a lot of encounters that you just want to take at ranged, and your melee characters will have some trouble contributing to them. This gives this character a great alternative mode where you can either run up and rage and bash things with your weapon, or you can sit back and shoot, depending on what the situation calls for. For our second cantrip, we're going to be taking Booming Blade. Although, again, you can't use this while raging, whenever you're not raging, this is just an incredibly powerful option, and what you can do with Booming Blade is have it be your first attack in a combat before you enter rage. Since you can only use it for one half of your extra attacks, the normal attack pattern for this character is going to be to run up to an enemy, cast Booming Blade on that enemy, then use your bonus action to enter rage, and then make your second attack. So we get all of the bonus damage from Booming Blade and all of the cool effects of Wild Magic Rage all at once in the opening rounds of combat. And of course, in any encounter where you're not raging, Booming Blade is just going to be excellent. Also, because the subclass is new, just to remind you what we get from Hexblade, we get the ability to bind a hexed weapon, which works basically the same as Pact of the Blade, allowing us to attack using our charisma instead of our strength or dexterity, which of course means that we can tie everything that this character does to charisma. That's great for Wild Magic Barbarian because some of our abilities are charisma based for that character. Usually you have to sacrifice those abilities, because you just can't afford to take charisma on a barbarian, but for this character, we get to tie everything to a single attribute, so our melee attacks, our spell casting, and our barbarian abilities will all work off of the same stat. We also get Hexblade's Curse, which lets us target an enemy, and also has a chance to apply on every one of our attacks with our hexed weapon, 20% chance every time we hit an enemy to just get them cursed, and adds our proficiency bonus to damage and increases our critical hit chance. Increased critical hit chance is great for a barbarian because we have reckless attack, so we're always attacking with advantage, meaning that the increased critical hit chance means a lot more critical hits. And the extra damage equal to our proficiency bonus is a ton. In combination with Rage, that's +4 damage on every attack starting at level 2 with just Hexblade Warlock and 1 level of Barbarian, which is a ton of damage. That's just like having Tavern Brawler 2 levels early. So this character is outputting a lot of melee damage right from the beginning. We also get medium armor, shields, and martial weapon proficiencies. We would be getting those from Barbarian anyways, so that's not that big a deal, but just getting to tie everything to charisma and having the extra damage is incredible. For our spell selection, we're going to be taking Shield. This character is going to be tanking a lot of attacks, or enemies will target you a lot because you'll be reckless attacking frequently, so they'll often have advantage on their attacks against you. Shield can be, at time of recording, cast while raging. This is a bug, of course, it's a spell, you shouldn't be able to use it while raging, but it does work. So if an enemy attacks you because they have advantage, you can often prevent a lot of damage to your party by shielding that attack, and it only costs you a Warlock spell slot, which comes back on a short rest. So having these 6 shields per day makes the character a lot tankier than you might think otherwise. For our second spell, we have a lot more options, but I'm going to recommend Armor of Agathis. This lets us turn a short rest spell slot into a long rest resource. Even if it's only 5 temp HP, those 5 temp HP are often going to be effectively doubled, because Rage will be giving us resistance to all physical damage, so it'll be more like 10 temp HP, and 5 extra damage whenever we get hit in the early game adds up pretty quickly. So Armor of Agathis and Shield make us really resilient, and of course we're going to be doing a lot of damage thanks to all of the abilities that we've already discussed. For our ability score selection, we get to tie everything to charisma, because that's what Hexblade Warlock lets us get away with, so we get to take a very classic attribute split of 16 dexterity, 14 constitution, 12 wisdom, and 16 charisma. This character also benefits a ton from Ethel's Hair. There's a lot of feats we want, so while of course we can just take 2 ASIs to raise our charisma to maximum, we could skip one of those if we take 17 starting charisma and use Ethel's Hair to go up to 18. It's not mandatory. If there's another character in your party who needs it more, then you definitely can do that, but this character benefits from it a lot. I will also say that this character is really fun with the Feats at Even Levels mod, which I've recommended a couple times before, which lets you use some of the cool martial feats and take those in addition to just raising your attributes. This character benefits from a lot of feats, so that can give you some more cool options. I'll mention some of the feats that I would take if using that mod as we go through the build. For skill selection, since you are a charisma-based character, this can be your party face. If you're playing Karlach specifically, you won't get access to Persuasion, because her background doesn't give it, and Warlocks can't take it by default. But if you're building this as a custom character, I highly recommend a background like Guild Artisan, for example, that gives you Persuasion access. With Karlach, though, Deception and Intimidation will be enough, especially because you get access to the unique Barbarian Intimidation dialogues, which often have very low check DCs, so with our super high charisma and intimidation proficiency, we will always succeed on those, making you a surprisingly good party face, even without persuasion as a class skill. That's it for level 1, let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we actually have an interesting choice right away. We could take our second level of Warlock, because that gets us our Eldritch Invocations, which give us Agonizing Blasts, increasing the effectiveness of our ranged attacks enormously, and Devil's Sight. especially if we're a character that gets casts of darkness naturally, like an Asmodeus Tiefling or a Drow, then Devil's Sight will allow us to operate in darkness. We could also take a 3rd level of Warlock right away and have darkness abuse from the beginning of the game. Or we could take levels of Barbarian to try to get extra attack and our Wild Magic abilities as soon as possible. On the whole, I think it's better to multi-class and take a level of Barbarian. Extra attack is just so good that getting it as quickly as we can is very, very important, and this also makes us much more resilient in melee combat by giving us the extra hit points and rage that Barbarian gets. You could consider playing this character just as a straight Warlock to level 5 and then respecking to Warlock 1, Barbarian 6 at Barbarian 5 at level 6 in order to get extra attack even earlier. But playing it with this is just the most natural level progression and gives you your melee abilities much sooner. With the first level of Barbarian, we get Rage, so we're now doing 4 extra damage on every attack, and we have resistance to physical damage, which combines very well with our Armor of Agathis to make us extremely tanky, so we're doing a ton of damage and tanking very well, and again, everything is tied to our Charisma. At level 3, we're taking our 2nd level of Barbarian, which of course gets us access to my favorite ability to talk for several minutes about, Reckless Attack. Reckless Attack is great for every character, of course, because it lets you hit your melee attacks more easily, but it's especially synergistic with this character because we have Armor of Agathis, we maybe have Hellish Rebuke, so we actually want enemies to attack us in a lot of circumstances. And with the shield spell, we can bait them into attacking us, and then even with advantage, we can often turn that hit that they were going to get on this character into a miss. So not only is Reckless Attack good for all the reasons it's normally good, manipulating enemy aggro by making them more likely to attack your tanky melee character and hitting your attacks more often, this character especially wants enemies to attack them because we have the ability to block those attacks, saving our party damage overall, or retaliate against those attacks with Armor of Agathis damage or Hellish Rebuke damage, making this character even better at using Reckless Attack than every Barbarian already is. Then, at character level 4, we're taking our 3rd level of Barbarian, and we get our Barbarian subclass. We already know what we're taking here, it's Wild Magic Barbarian, and I imagine many of you have never seen this button pushed. Wild Magic Barbarian gets 2 things immediately when you level into it. Wild Magic Rage, which has 1 of 8 possible effects, random effects, every time you rage, as well as the effects of normal rage, the additional damage and damage reduction that you get, and Magic Awareness. I'll talk about Magic Awareness first. Magic Awareness costs your bonus action, and for 1 turn gives you an aura, where within 10 feet of you, every ally adds their proficiency bonus to saving throws against spells. This is basically like having the Paladin Aura of Protection, but only for 1 turn, and it costs you a bonus action. But you get it many levels early. So this character is actually very good at resisting enemy spellcasters. If you know that there is a dangerous spell coming up, popping Magic Awareness will almost certainly protect your party from it, because a plus 2 to 4 bonus on every saving throw is enough to make it very unreliable for enemies to hit, or very reliable for you to pass your saves. So Magic Awareness is a surprisingly good and useful defensive ability. It also makes one of the primary purposes of melee characters, locking down enemy spellcasters in melee so that they can't position where they want and die if they try to cast their spells at you, even easier for this character because you're much less likely to be hit by a hold person or something and then just stand there ineffectively while the wizard fireballs the rest of your team to ashes. Next, let's break down Wild Magic Rage. So when you enter a Wild Magic Rage, you will get a random effect. There are 8 possible random effects, and unlike Wild Magic Sorcerer, where some of these effects are negative and can seriously impact your honor mode run and make it much more difficult, Wild Magic Barbarian only has positive effects as long as you obey some very basic positioning rules for where your character stands when they enter a rage. All 8 of these effects are good, and they come in roughly 3 different categories. 3 of these 8 effects just increase your damage. They're going to give you more damage on every attack. They usually come with a minor rider effect, like the ability to throw your weapon, though for this character we won't be able to do that because you can't throw a hexed or blade-pacted weapon, but they will just increase your damage. 3 of them give you a cool bonus action effect. So you can activate the ability again as a bonus action to do some damage to an enemy, usually with a saving throw, and 2 of them cause a negative effect to enemies within a certain radius of you, or to creatures within a certain radius of you. One of them's 10 feet, one of them's 30 feet. So what that means is, as long as you're within 30 feet of an enemy and outside of 30 feet of an ally, these will always be positive effects. So your normal plan of run up to an enemy, hit Booming Blade, enter a rage works very well, because you just have to be 30 feet away from your allies to make sure that your wild magic effects are always positive. The really cool thing, though, is with the 3 bonus action abilities. The save DCs for these are based on your charisma, sort of. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but they're based on your charisma. That means that for Wild Magic Barbarians normally, the save DCs will be very, very low because your charisma, you won't be able to invest in it. For this character, the save DCs on these effects will actually be pretty good. Now, there are some bugs with the save DC. I think one of these abilities has a fixed DC of 12, although it shows up wrong in the combat log, and 2 of them actually use your charisma. So we'll see if those get fixed in patch 8. I have reported these bugs, and I don't actually know if it's intended to have a fixed DC of 12 or use your charisma, but since it reports your charisma as the casting stat in the combat log, I assume that's what it's supposed to do. So because we get to tie everything to our charisma, our character gets these effects at maximum capacity. That means that not only do we get only positive effects, we actually use them all very well to blind enemies, do a bunch of damage to them, keep them in difficult terrain, knock them prone. And whenever we activate these effects, something cool happens. We get to plan the rest of our turn around it, while also just dishing out incredible damage. At character level 4, we are taking our 4th level of Barbarian and getting access to our first feat. Of course, we have a lot of different options here. We could take an ability score improvement just to boost our charisma, which is never bad for this character. We could take alert, always excellent on honor mode, but the feat that I'm going to recommend is Great Weapon Master. This character benefits from having incredibly high crit chance and reckless attack, because we have increased critical hit chance against enemies that we have hexed with our Hexblade's curse. And we have reckless attack, so we're making all our attacks with advantage. We're going to critically hit a lot, which means a lot of extra attacks with Great Weapon Master. It's also just a ton of extra damage, and even when we're not raging, we will often be able to be fighting within darkness, inside Cloud of Darkness for advantage, and enemies having disadvantage. So we're going to be generating a lot of critical hits, killing a lot of enemies, and getting the most possible use out of Great Weapon Master, so I recommend taking this. If you are finding that you're missing your attacks a lot, you could delay Great Weapon Master until your second feat, but I think that you should be able to set it up with Bless from an ally, and with the advantage from Reckless Attack, to be able to hit with your Great Weapon Master attacks constantly for an enormous amount of additional damage and more attacks than most other characters are able to get. Then, at character level 6, we're going to be taking our 5th level of Barbarian to get access to extra attack. I don't need to go into why extra attack is so good. We can all tell that doubling your damage output is going to be excellent, and extra attack does that and many more things besides, letting you apply more rider effects and so on. But fast movement is an ability that, while normally excellent, is especially synergistic for this character. Our movement speed is really nice because we want to be 30 feet away from our allies when we activate Rage, and we want to be as close to as many enemies as possible when we activate Rage to maximize the chances of enemies getting hit by one of the negative AoE effects. So our positioning is going to be really important. We also will very shortly be getting excellent ranged attacks with Agonizing Blast and Darkness Abuse with Casts of Darkness. So having fast movement lets us kite enemies backwards or position our darkness clouds perfectly to cheese the encounters that we want to cheese with darkness, or to kite enemies away while Eldritch Blasting them into oblivion. Then, at character level 7, we again have another interesting choice. We could keep leveling in Barbarian, because Barbarian levels 6, 7, and 8 are all really good. The wild magic abilities that we get at level 6 are really nice. The Feral Instinct initiative bonus is excellent at level 7, and we get a feat at level 8. Or we could level in Warlock to get better Eldritch Blasts and Darkness Abuse and so on online a little sooner. I'm going to recommend that you level in Warlock here. I think that this will make the character a little more well-rounded and give you more options for when just raging and charging in isn't the best move. So this will give you some spell casting, and it will also increase the effectiveness of your Warlock spells as you level up. So we're going to take a second level of Warlock. That gets us 2 more spells, which is going to let us take Hellish Rebuke. We can also pick up Hex for when we're not raging. Again, you can't concentrate on Hex when you're raging, of course, but this will make our Eldritch Blasts much more effective if we want to do those in fights where we're not using a rage charge. We also get our Eldritch Invocations, and of course we all know what we're going to take. Agonizing Blast makes our ranged attacks vastly more effective, because now we add our Charisma to our Eldritch Blast, and we're firing multiple beams at this point. And Devil's Sight is going to give us the extremely powerful in Baldur's Gate 3 ability to see in magical darkness, which a lot of enemies can't, so we'll have advantage on all our attacks. They won't be able to make ranged attacks against us, and we just can win a lot of fights for free when we have the Devil's Sight and Darkness combo. So this gives us the cheese and also just makes us a more well-rounded character, so we're going to level in Warlock before taking our other Barbarian levels for this build, but I wanted to mention that either way you want to, either order is totally fine for the character. The Barbarian levels are also very strong. Then, at character level 8, we're going to be taking our 3rd level of Warlock to get 2nd level Warlock spells to allow this character to cast Darkness for itself and enable Darkness Abuse. We're going to be taking, of course, Darkness as our Warlock spell, and we're also going to replace one of our level 1 spells if there's one that you find you aren't using. I would recommend replacing Hex, probably, because now you're going to be concentrating on Darkness whenever you're concentrating on a spell, or Hellish Rebuke, because anytime you're not raging, you probably don't want to get hit. So we can replace either of these and pick up a control spell like Hold Person. We could also take one of these smite attacks, or like Branding Smite, or we could take Cloud of Daggers for some extremely reliable damage, but Hold Person is really nice because some encounters where you want to save a rage charge, you can just spend a Warlock spell slot on taking the most powerful enemy out of the fight. We'll have decent save DCs because our Charisma is going to be high, so Hold Person is pretty good as well. So you can swap Hellish Rebuke for Hold Person if you think you're going to use it. If you're finding you're using Hellish Rebuke a lot, I would keep Hellish Rebuke. Either way is going to be pretty nice. For our Pact boon at this level, we don't need Pact of the Blade, because we have extra attack from Barbarian, so we don't need to pick up, and we have Hexblade already, so we don't need Pact of the Blade at all. Either Chain or Tome are going to be fine. Mostly these are going to be for flavor, because at this point in the game, the Imp or Quasit is a lot less useful. You also have access to the story event Imp, and you should probably have access to Guidance with the rest of your party by this point anyways, and you have the item that gives it to you. Pact of the Chain is most likely to be useful because the Quasit is still going to be pretty excellent throughout the game, even on into the end game. So Pact of the Chain gives you a few more options, but honestly, you can take either of those two, whatever you prefer for the character's flavor. Then we're going to be taking our 4th level of Warlock to get another feat as soon as we can. That gets us an additional cantrip, which of course we're going to take True Strike to annoy people in the YouTube comments. And for our spell selection, whatever spell that we want here. Oh, one spell that's worth mentioning as not being particularly strong for this character is Shadowblade. We only cast it at level 2 because we only have 2nd level Warlock spell slots, so we're not upcasting the Shadowblade, and it's a short sword, so it doesn't benefit from Great Weapon Master. So although Shadowblade is really cool for a lot of melee Warlock builds, it's not particularly synergistic with this one. Here, we can just pick up Hellish Rebuke again and just sort of even out our spell selection to make sure that we have both reactions and offensive actions. And then for our feat, we're going to be grabbing an ability improvement and picking up Charisma. I will mention that if you're using the Feats at Even Level mod, or if you are using Ethel's Hair to maximize your Charisma, Alert here is also very good, but this character also benefits from a lot of the really cool combat feats that you don't get to take very often. I particularly like Mage Slayer because we will be able to disrupt enemy casters a lot. Between the Wild Magic Barbarian's improvement to saving throws against spells, and the fact that we're just up against an enemy, we can blind them with darkness, preventing them from casting spells, and keep them in place with with our melee attacks, preventing them from running away without taking an attack of opportunity, Mage Slayer gives us a lot of options. Another really awesome feat option for this character is Sentinel, because this character wants enemies trapped next to you, so your wild magic rages can continuously harm them with the AoE effects, and also so you can keep them trapped inside clouds of darkness, because that's where you fight best and they fight worst. Sentinel, preventing enemy movement speed, can really keep enemy characters locked down. In combination, these two feats can keep mages next to you, and then also you can keep attacking them with additional reactions. So Sentinel gives you a lot of extra options for locking down enemies, which is exactly what this character wants to do. If you've got Sentinel and you have extra feats, Polearm Master is always great as well if you want to commit to using a polearm, because then you can stop enemies from getting to you and keep them locked either near you or away from you. So there's a lot of really cool feat options that this character can take that give you a lot more optionality if you're using a mod to get additional feats, or Ethel's Hair to get at least one more. Then, at level 10, what level we take here is going to depend on the difficulty level that we're playing on. On Tactician mode or below, the extra attack from Pact of the Blade and extra attack from Barbarian stack, giving you a third attack every action. So on Tactician difficulty or below, we would take Pact of the Blade, take our 5th level of Warlock, and have 3 attacks every turn. On Honor mode, I'm going to recommend just going back to take more levels of Barbarian, because now we get even more cool abilities from Wild Magic. We get Bolstering Magic, which is a surprisingly good ability. It's Bless. It lasts for 10 turns, so you can precast it before combat, and give yourself an additional d4 on your attack rolls, or give an ally an additional d4 on attack rolls and ability checks. Very nice for passing skill rolls that you know are coming up, and also really nice for just hitting your attacks. Really solid and powerful ability. The trick is to remember to use it, because you probably won't have ever cast it before unless you've previously played a Wild Magic Barbarian. Unlikely, unless you're me. It's very easy to forget that you have this ability. Bolstering Magic can also give you back these level 1 spell slots and level 2 spell slots. So once per long rest, you can give yourself or an ally your spell slots back. And you can recover these even with Warlock spell slots, though generally this is going to be better used on a spellcasting ally who only recovers their spells on a long rest, rather than you, who get your spell slots back on a short rest. So this just gives your party a little bit more longevity, but the real benefit here is that you get Bless that stacks with Bless and just makes you way better at passing skill checks and hitting with your abilities. At level 11, we're taking a 7th level of Barbarian, getting one of my favorite class features in the game, Feral Instinct. This is 3/5 of the Alert feat, without having to spend a feat on Alert, so this character gets to get away with just 16 Dexterity and Feral Instinct, maybe 1 or 2 pieces of Initiative gear if +6 isn't enough, which personally I prefer somewhere closer to +8 Initiative, so I'd like to have a piece of Initiative gear on this character. But Feral Instinct just makes you go first in combat. Obviously, we all know why going first in combat is so good in Dungeons & Dragons, because when you go first, enemies often don't get to go second, because they're dead. So, Feral Instinct, an incredibly powerful ability, very much worth going to Barbarian level 7 to get this feature. And finally, at character level 12, we're taking our 8th level of Barbarian to pick up our last feat. That feat is going to be an ability score improvement to boost our charisma up to maximum, though all of the feats that I mentioned previously, as well as just anything that you think is cool if you have the feats at even level mod for this character. Things like Charger can be really nice. Mobile is really good because just moving around is great on this character. There's a lot of really cool options that you can take. So play around if you're taking extra feats, but of course for the normal way to build the character, we just want to maximize our charisma to the greatest possible extent. Another useful one is Savage Attacker, just to increase our damage output. We don't have smite attacks or anything like that, but Savage Attacker still just gives you way more damage, especially for all of our melee weapon attacks. So those are all great options, but just maximizing our hit chance and damage by maxing our charisma is the most important thing. Alright, my friends, that's the build, but of course we can improve it even further with items and Illithid Powers, so let's talk about those. 4 items for this character. We're actually extremely item independent. What items we use and what weapons we use for this character can really be very determined by what the rest of our party needs. So we fit very well into any honor mode party because we pretty much cover all of our own requirements without need for any specific gear. There's also some gear that isn't that commonly required by other characters that synergizes extremely well with this character. So not only can we get away with using just whatever the rest of our party doesn't need, we also expand the options for our party to use gear effectively by using a lot of relatively unusual gear much more powerfully than most characters would. Firstly, of course, there's some generically powerful options that we're always going to be happy to have. Any increases to our charisma, like from the Birthright hat or from story events, are going to be excellent for this character, increasing our damage output both with melee and ranged attacks and the save DCs of our spells. Also, increases to our save DC and damage, either on damage on our weapon attacks or damage on every attack, and increases to our save DCs, which do work with some of the Wild Magic Barbarian abilities, though not all of them, work very well, so an item like the Helldusk gloves can be excellent for this character. We will also want a just a solid piece of medium armor. This character can get away with having relatively low AC because we have the shield spell, and we have a lot of damage reduction sources, so we don't mind taking hits, but an item like the Adamantine Scale Mail that gives us gives us immunity to critical hits, makes the character a lot more reliable because we're much less likely to take a huge spike of damage and suddenly go down, forcing you to change your plans in the middle. We're already going to be having to change our plan based on what Wild Magic Surge we get, so we want plans that we change in the middle of combat to be because of good things, not because of bad things. This is where things get a little bit more fun, though. There's a lot of weapons that I think are really excellent for this character that other characters might not necessarily want to take. So firstly, of course, I should mention this is like an ideal candidate to carry Falara Louv into combat. You're always going to be up in the mix. Casting Shriek is going to give you a lot of extra damage, so this character is very good. We also use a couple weapons very well that I think not a lot of characters want to use, but this character uses excellently. The Sword of Chaos is great for us, restoring hit points every time we attack. This character is going to be taking a lot of damage because we're reckless attacking frequently, and we multiply all of these hit points because we have a lot of damage reduction from our Barbarian Rages and from Wild Magic, which can also help heal us and everything. So our Sword of Chaos attacks, which we're making a lot of, thanks to Great Weapon Master, critical hits, giving us extra attack and everything, will be restoring a lot of hit points. That can make this character very tanky. Another cool weapon that I think works extremely well for this character is the Intransigent Warhammer. We're going to be getting a lot of critical hits because we increase our critical hit chance when we have hexed a weapon, and we're reckless attacking frequently or attacking in darkness frequently. We can, and of course we're going to be killing a lot of enemies because we have Great Weapon Master. So the Intransigent Warhammer can help us knock enemies prone constantly. All of this is based on our charisma, and there is a save DC for the Intransigent Warhammer, but it actually uses our spell save, so enemies are going to be knocked prone very, very consistently with the Intransigent Warhammer attacks. So I really like this weapon for this character. Some other really cool niche options for this character include the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. All of our attacks are made with our charisma, and our spellcasting stat is our charisma. So anytime we inflict a condition, which we can do with pretty much every weapon that we want, will inflict a condition on most hits. Of course, Hexblade's Curse counts as a condition. Our Wild Magic Surges often count as a condition. So we're going to be getting Diadem of Arcane Synergy triggers very frequently. Arcane Synergy gives us extra damage on our weapon attacks equal to our charisma. So we're going to be doing tons of extra damage with every attack with that. So that's a great alternative to the Birthright, especially if we've taken the story events that let us get higher charisma. Increases to our critical hit chance, or guaranteed critical hits, are great for this character. The Killer's Sweetheart will just let us get more crits every adventuring day, and make sure that we get crits when they matter, which also lets us trigger our Great Weapon Master swings. And another favorite item for this character is the Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet. We're going to be critically hitting a lot, paralyzing an enemy once per long rest is an awesome ability for any character to have, especially in melee, and again helps with this character being a disruptive and high damage melee fighter. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that as with any darkness-based character, the best weapon for this character is going to be Char's Spear of Evening, the part here being played by Saloon's Spear of Night, but I'll pop up the wiki entry because I don't have it in this save file, and patch 8 gets weird when you try to mod items into it. So Char's Spear of Evening, of course, gives us a bunch of extra attacks of extra casts of darkness, the ability to cast darkness as part of an attack and do AoE damage to everything in that attack. So just an incredibly powerful weapon, probably the single best weapon in the game to actually attack with, and incredibly synergistic with this character, so the best in slot weapon for this character. But there's also some less in demand and less locked behind story event weapons that are really cool, so I wanted to mention those as well. This character also benefits from being one of the best characters in the game to use Illithid Powers with. We have a really high spell save DC, because we want to boost our save DC. All of our everything is tied to a single stat, so our Illithid Powers will use our Charisma for everything, and we can have any power that uses our save DC be more effective. Of course, we also are making weapon attacks, so we benefit from all of the powers that care about weapon attacks. Favorable Beginnings makes our Great Weapon Master attacks more likely to land. Luck of the Far Realms gives us extra critical hits. Cool the Weak lets us explode enemies. All of the Illithid powers are incredibly synergistic. In general, I would take Favorable Beginnings and Luck of the Far Realms first for this character, which is going to give you a really powerful ability. Charm is also surprisingly useful for us, disrupting enemies, and this character doesn't have a ton of reactions that we want to use, so Charm is actually pretty nice to stop enemies from attacking us multiple times. There's a lot of different powers that are really synergistic, giving us great reactions in addition to our shield spell, as well as more powerful options for our attacks. But the most important ones are Favorable Beginnings to make our attacks more reliable, Luck of the Far Realms to give us guaranteed critical hits, and Cool the Weak to let us explode every enemy on the field, which again just goes with our ability to disrupt enemy actions by exploding all their buddies and chaining damage between all of them. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Wild Magic Barbarian, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing something cool that we can do with the new classes in patch 8. Obviously, there's a lot of really, really powerful builds that we can make with Hexblade and stuff like that, but I also really like that it enables these lesser-used subclasses to be cool and powerful characters in their own right. So hopefully you enjoy this, and hopefully it helps you plan your next Honor Mode run. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a comment and hit the like button. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.